And so you've got a choice. Am I going to have, do I want my team to be in the top 1% of teams in my industry? And therefore I've got the opportunity to be 10 times better than average or not.
Yeah.
And it's, that's a choice, right? It doesn't happen by accident. You don't get a world-class team by accident. Small business owners often have this, I've got Mary, she's amazing, I'm going to hire somebody cheaper and shitter.
Yeah.
And so they are making it, they are unconsciously making a decision to reduce the quality of their team. When I point that out to people, they go, oh,
That's a,
you are, I am doing that. You are right. I am guilty, but I hadn't.
Alrighty, welcome to this week's episode of The Freedom Experience. As always, I'm your host, John Moncrief, and this is the podcast where we explore what it takes to scale a business, build a high-performing team, and to reclaim your entrepreneurial freedom. So today I'm joined by Dominic Monkhouse. Dominic is a business coach, a speaker, and former managing director of Rackspace and Pier 1 Hosting. And Dom took both of those businesses from 0 to 30 million. So in this episode, we dive into the intentional steps that Dom took to build a team of A players that was capable of taking those businesses from 0 to 30, and why this is so important as a foundation for scaling any business. We also talk about how he intentionally created a company culture to attract those A players, and how he's very thoughtful about where he located the business and how he set that up. And then finally, we talk about why business owners must shift from what Dom calls a basketball kind of way of playing to a football or soccer mindset as you scale beyond the sort of 70 employee mark. So one of the things I loved about this episode was how Dom had this description of what an A player is. And he talked about one of the people on his team, Jill, who does all the cleaning in the office, and how she will talk for hours all day long about cleaning. And she just has this really deep curiosity about cleaning products and methodologies. And she even brings her own materials to the office because, frankly, Dom doesn't provide good enough products for her as a professional cleaner. So she constantly surprises him about the way she cleans and the way she does things. And for him, that's his definition of an A player. Someone who doesn't need to be told what to do. They just get in there, they do the job, they live the values, and they do it excellently. And then he contrasts that with a B player who sort of might not notice the dust building up on the skirting boards. And he talks about that you actually have to point out this to them. So they have this skirting board dust blindness. And they'll do an okay job if you're specific enough with them, but they lack the resourcefulness and the proactive nature of an A player. And I thought that's one of the best descriptions of the difference between an A player and a B player. So whether you're a founder looking to scale a business or whether you're managing a team, this conversation is really packed with actionable insights that can help you to grow and to scale your business to a place where it thrives. So let's dive in with Dom. Dom, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on today, and thanks for taking the time to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Delighted to be here.
I'm super excited about the conversation as well. I just finished reading your book and listened to some of the brilliant podcasts over the last few weeks. But I'm really interested. You have a long history building businesses and scaling businesses. And one of those businesses in the UK you took from 0 to 30 million. What does it take to do that?
Well, I actually managed to do it twice. So we did the UK or EMEA part of Rackspace, and then we did the same thing with Pier 1 a few years later. And I think you got to be lucky. So I think you got to, probably in both cases, we were selling something that somebody wanted to buy, right? And so quite often I meet people who have a wonderful idea and they've built a thing and now they're trying to sell it, and then they've worked out that nobody actually wants to buy it and they're in all sorts of pain. So, we were selling infrastructure to people who needed managed services around their infrastructure. It was tough to do on your own. We did it from a perspective of service was our thing. The telco should have owned our space and they didn't, because they were in the denial of service business. And so we but we managed to go up market. So that's another thing. When I started at Rackspace, the average deal was $99 a month. And by the time I left, we'd just done a deal which was sort of $56,000 a month.
Okay.
And at Pier 1, a few years later, our average, our entry level or average deal size was sort of $249 a month. And then by the time I left, we had a client who was spending $1 million a month. And so that has a massive impact.
Yeah.
And so the widgets that we were selling were the same. We were just building them into bigger and bigger, I don't know, Lego houses and castles and, entire villages. And so that has a massive impact on scalability and profitability, because those larger customers much, much more profitable.
So you came into an environment where there was a lot of growth. I mean, at that time we were, I guess, moving to cloud. Was it that at that time where the shift was happening, or before that?
It's before. If your definition of cloud is Azure and AWS, it's before both of those things really took off. If your definition of it is the same, I think, as IDC, which is cloud compute is what's not on your premises.
Yeah.
Then we were definitely in the off-prem our data centers managed by us with our infrastructure. So you were buying a service from us, but you weren't buying. I don't know. You were buying physical servers, or in some cases you were buying virtual servers, but you weren't using software to deliver it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I think so that ability to go up market and do bigger deals was huge. I think that the competitors, in both cases, these were two service-led businesses, and both, by the time I started Pier 1, it was sort of 10 years on from when I'd started at Rackspace, and you'd have thought Rackspace had been so successful and, had led with service, everybody else would have copied them. And when we were doing the sort of pre-market, sort of demand analysis around building Pier 1 in Europe, where historically it had been in Canada and the US, I'm looking at the marketplace and I'm going, hang on, Rackspace I think then they were maybe 100 million. And so I'm going, okay, well, there should be somebody at 50 million, and then there should be somebody else at 25. And there was nobody at all. So it was like that whole, the number two space was completely open, because none of the competitors had just said, well, Rackspace do service, so we're going to have to try and compete on something else, which was then unsuccessful. And so that opportunity to say, well, look, if Rackspace are 100 million, we could build a 50 million pound business here. And obviously Rackspace will, they'll go up, but that space is there. And, launched the business and got to 30 million in 5 years.
So you had a clear vision of what you wanted to create. There's a wave, you kind of riding that wave, but you had a clear vision of we're not going to be like the rest of the crowd. There is this gap here, and we're going to take it to 50 million ultimately. That was the goal.
And then and at Rackspace we looked at who our competitors were when we started, and we looked at BT and Cable and Wireless and various other competitors, and we sort of said, why are they competing? What are we doing? And at Rackspace, we went very clearly after digital agencies.
Yeah.
Because there's a multiplier model there. If we win a digital agency, we win the next 50 projects that they win. If we win some of these massive digital agencies, then, we win massive projects. So that was sort of the Rackspace thing. At Pier 1, we said, look, we're good at hosted VMware and we're good at hosted e-commerce, or we could be. That could be a niche that we could own in the UK. And so then we did a partnership around VMware, and then we deliberately targeted e-commerce as a thing. And we ended up being, 2 years later, the number one hoster of e-commerce in the UK. There were 24 deals and we won 16 of them. So, that was a very deliberate sort of partner content strategy.
Yeah.
Because that gave us some big deals, gave us some Halo customers, if you like, and Halo projects. So
luck plays into it, obviously the trend of what's going on in the market. But you also, one of the things I read or noticed is that you talk about, if you're a small team under 50, make sure you are 100% A players. So this idea of having the best team.
Yeah, having done it and like in between Pier One and in between Rackspace and Pier One, I did a turnaround at IT Lab. So there's sort of three sort of chunks of time. What would I have done differently if I went back in time,
Yeah.
right? And so at Pier One, I was very, very struck with two things that we did very differently. One was the first 50 had to all be, if every month, would I enthusiastically rehire them? And if they resigned, would I fight hard to keep them, right? So if you say yes and yes, then you don't worry about it. But if you say no, or I'm not sure to either of those questions, then, that they shouldn't be on the team, right? If you are Eddie Howe at Newcastle United and you're trying to win the Premier League or, the League Cup at the moment, they beat Arsenal 2-0 in the first leg on Monday. You are trying to build the best team that you can afford. And if you've got a goal or an aspiration, then how do you build the best team you can afford? There's, the data is really compelling. McKinsey looked at drug development teams in the pharmaceutical industry. They asked them, do you believe your team performance is above average? And 85% of those teams believed their performance was above average. So often teams are self-delusional about their performance because there's not an external benchmark. But when they looked at the data, the top 1% of drug development teams in the world were 10x better than average.
Jeez. Okay.
And so when you patent a drug, you've got to get it through all the clinical trials, and then you lose the patent after 8 years. And so you've only got 8 years from the moment you start to the moment you finish. And it takes, I think it's about $2 billion, right, to get a drug to market. The top performing teams got those drugs to market 500 days quicker.
Wow.
Than average, right? So that's 500 days. And that 500 days, you win that 500 days at the end when you've got your sales and your maximum profit. That 500 days is, it's going to go off a cliff and go generic. And then the next sort of 2, 3, 4, 5, they're 5x better than average. And so you've got a choice. Am I going to have, do I want my team to be in the top 1% of teams in my industry? And therefore I've got the opportunity to be 10 times better than average, or not?
Yeah.
And that's a choice, right? It doesn't happen by accident. You don't get a world-class team by accident. You've got to define a recruitment process, go to market, have an employer brand. So what did we do at Pier One? We weren't in London, right? So we deliberately not in London. That means I'm competing for talent. I'm a big fish in a small pond. I built a fantastic office. We refurbed a derelict pub and restaurant, put it all together. ABP, our landlord, collaborated with us, and we built what the Daily Telegraph said was the coolest office outside of Google in the UK. We had a slide and a pub and an indoor garden, and everybody could, if you cycle to work, you could hang your bike in the office, and pool tables, and just fantastic space. And we ended up with journalists and camera crews from all over Europe when we opened. And it meant that in Southampton, when we were recruiting, if we put a job ad out, people would tell people who would tell people that we were recruiting.
You were oversubscribed.
We were oversubscribed because and we were then paying, I don't know, 15 to 20% less than if we had hired the same people in London. And in the 5 years we were there, we lost one A player. His wife, I think, was more ambitious than he was, so he left. But then 6 months later, he came back. And so, we would attract A players, we would keep A players, and it's part of a deliberate plan. And we were paying 15 to 20% less than our competitors in London forever. So, it's the gift that keeps on giving. You've got, that all was a sort of, knowing what I knew before Rackspace, we were just on the outside of the M25. So we were having to pay London salaries, but half our people were being overpaid and half of them were being paid correctly. But just that was just sort of, a sort of an accident, because I didn't pick the office space when I joined Rackspace. And at Pier One, I was very deliberate about it.
So you took that lesson from Rackspace in terms of thinking about where you're going to put that office space. And that exercise that you're talking about and asking, would I enthusiastically rehire this person? Was that with your leadership team, or was that going kind of levels deeper in those early stages every month? I mean, you were thinking about it.
Yes, because, otherwise what happens is you get to about the 170, 80th person, right? And you bump into them in the office. And I think to myself, who the fuck are you? What do you do? Who hired you? And all I've done is met you. And I'm thinking to myself, I wouldn't have hired you. I don't even know anything about you. And already I don't like you. And it's like, you should not have that visceral reaction about people in your team. But sort of recruitment often gets done as a sort of concentric circles, like an onion.
Yeah.
Like when you start, like, you don't get trained to interview. It takes up a lot of time. People don't like doing it. And so therefore they often delegate it to the next person. You get to 10 people, and now you've got a series of heads of or managers, and they're doing their own recruitment. Well, are they A players? Do they have any experience? Have you coached them? And so, at Rackspace, I had that experience where I would meet people that I'm thinking to myself, if I had been part of this recruitment process, they wouldn't have got through. And so at Pier 1, I was very deliberate. And at the point where I couldn't physically do all the interviewing, we had I stole a thing from Google where at Google, managers don't hire, promote, or fire or give pay rises, right? That gets done by the machine. And so what we did is we had a Friday afternoon meeting where it was like, if you want to hire somebody, I might not have met them, but you bring their CV, you bring their Gallup strength scores, you bring your interview notes. And we also would get people to draw a picture. So if you would come for interview, in the first 10 minutes of interview, you get a packet of colored pencils, and I would ask you to draw, the team would ask you to draw, what is it motivates you or inspires you, draw a picture. And then you would ask the interviewer to interview you about your picture. And so on a Friday afternoon, I've got a picture. I get a sense of what motivates and inspires people. I've got some Gallup strength information. I've got their CV. I've got some interview notes. And I look at that and go, this isn't right. There's something here in their CV I don't think this person's the right person. Now, sometimes people go, no, Dom, I think you're wrong. I thought that, but look, let me show you in the notes. Let me tell you why I probed that. And you go, oh, okay. Yeah. And then I'm thinking, does this person have a track record of hiring great people? Okay, they're sticking up for a candidate, and actually, the last 5 people they've hired have turned out to be great, brilliant. I get to say yes. Somebody else turns up, and I go, I'm not sure about this. This isn't. And they go, yeah, no, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I remember reading about something. I actually, now that you mentioned it, I loved reading about the tool that you're using and asking people to kind of, here's a box of crayons and draw something. And you mentioned picking up on, I think, a woman who's a narcissist or narcissistic tendencies, something like that, coming out of a drawing.
She drew 3 pictures of herself just in red, one behind the wheel of a car, one with a handbag, and one, I think, with just dollar signs. And it's like, so this was for, I think, a sales role. So you are money motivated, and you didn't use the color palette, and it's all about you. And then you say, like, tell me about your picture. And they just say, well, they basically say, it's all about me.
Yeah.
And you don't, you go, that's fantastic, but we're really after team players here. So thanks very much. Good pictures have pictures of managers taking people up the hill, sunshine, tends not to have money in it, tends to have friends and family. And then I came across some research actually that said, when you get people to draw pictures, they can't lie. There's just this thing that says they have to put on paper the truth. And so, I didn't know that at the time when we started using this as a technique, but you are then talking to them again. I think it also helps in terms of selling the role to people, because their interview feels very different to an interview at a competitor. And you're spending half an hour talking to them about them, nothing about their CV, but what motivates them as a human being, and what gives them joy. And you want people.
Yeah.
I want people with hobbies. I want people. Look, we were like plumbers of the internet, so what we did wasn't very exciting, but you had to get a joy out of service. If you don't like serving people, it's like then this isn't going to be a good job for you, right? We are the Ritz-Carlton of IT services at Rackspace. And so, you get a sense of, will this person be a fit? without even, talking about their CV. And they come away going, God, this person was so interested in me, in a way that their manager has never got to know them, or none of the other interviews tried to get to know them. And so I think it helped us be more discerning, and it helped sell us to candidates as well.
I'm curious, did your time in the retail space kind of influence your thinking in making sure that the people that you're bringing in came from customer facing industries? Or
Yeah. I certainly, hiring people from competitors was always really difficult because they didn't have a service mentality. So, but if I hired people who had worked in pubs and restaurants, or retail, then, because you could always work in the warehouse, right? You would only work front of house if that brought you joy. Although, as if you're ever in a pub or a restaurant or a bar, you quite often come across individuals who seem to dislike humanity and are obviously in the wrong job. But if I've got somebody in front of me who has spent, I don't know, 3 years working at M&S whilst they were going through university, they got joy from that, right? There's a thing, right? So they're going to get joy from interacting with the human beings in our company and our customers. It's that. So it's building a team intentionally.
Yeah, being intentional about building the team. That's what I was thinking. And you talked about building the office, which attracted people to the office. I mean, we hear a lot about shortage of skills and all those kind of things at the moment. I don't know, this is one of your pet peeves as well.
I just think anybody. I mean, I had one of our clients, John Redman at Ask Bosco. He's up in Leeds, and they're building a platform which, using AI, will tell you if you spend money on Google ads and Facebook ads and such like. It will calculate for you which platform you should spend the next dollar on to get the best return. And people said, "Well, John, you're never going to get amazing people, PhD data scientists to come and live in Leeds and work for you because they're all in London." But he's decided that they can run their business on a 4-day week. And so the last time we put a job ad out, he had 35 PhDs with artificial intelligence experience who are prepared to come and work for him in Leeds.
Because they, 4 days and they get a day.
It's a 4-day week. Yeah. 4-day week, right? So it's about, what is the employee proposition that you need to create? Look, most job ads are dull as shit. There's a dull description of your company. Then there's a list of all these things you want people to be able to do, like, just ridiculousness. And then, it says, a benefit's 28 days holiday. It's like, that's not a benefit. That's a statutory requirement, right? Like you are forced as an employer to give your staff holiday. That's like, and you're forced to pay them, right? So the fact that they're going to get a salary is also not a benefit, right? But a 4-day week would be a benefit. Yeah. Right? That would be fab, right? Or, much better than industry average, much better than statutory minimum maternity pay or holiday, unlimited holiday. Or just think of things that would mean that on a Sunday when somebody's got because A players have jobs and they are good at them, which makes them A players. And on a Sunday night, you want to catch the A player with a glass of wine or a beer in their hand, and they've got their laptop open and they're thinking, it's Monday tomorrow. I'm not looking forward to Monday, and yet I know I'm very good at what I do. I wonder if there's a better company to work for. And your company needs to stand out. Your job ad, when they search for your company on Google, the images should be pictures of people having fun. I mean, so often I'll search, a client will say, "Oh, we're really having difficulty filling this role." And I type in their company name into Google, I press images.
Stock.
And there's nothing. There's a picture of the CEO, and then there's just loads of a page of shit, and you just go, hang on, do you not do staff parties? Oh yeah, we do. Like, well, why are there no pictures online? Like, why does your Glassdoor profile shit? Why is your Instagram shit? Why is your personal LinkedIn profile shit? Like, I wouldn't apply for a job in your company. And they're like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, "Have you looked?" Right? And it's like, they go, "No, I've never looked. I've never thought about it." Because like hiring the first 6 people is not that difficult. But then when you want to go from 6 to 60 or 50 to 150, you are now going to have to attract. You're now going to have to be in the market of you don't have a God-given right for people to ring you up and ask to come and work for you who are amazing. That's not what happens. And it makes me worried about their sales and marketing. If, because I think these two things are very similar, attracting and attracting customers are very similar. So, if you haven't thought through how do we attract talent, I'm nervous about whether you've thought through how to attract customers, right? Because these two things are so similar.
You make such a great point that they're so similar. And if you want to have top customers, growing business, solid business, you need to attract the top people, and the business has to be geared to, and the brand has to be geared to attracting from both sides.
Totally. I mean, and it's about, in both cases, it's about who's our ideal customer profile or who's our ideal candidate profile, being really specific about why somebody should come and work for you or why somebody should come and buy from you. Right? I don't think we've ever had a client. We've only worked with 100 and something CEOs, so it's not millions, but I don't think any of them have ever been able to clearly articulate why somebody buys from them and not from the competition or vice versa when they've started working with us. So that whole customer profiling, intentionality about sales and marketing, go to market, fairly uncommon.
So if you go back to what you're saying about having worked with 100 odd business owners and companies or more, and what you were saying earlier about we often think that we're the best team or that we have a great team, and going back to what you're talking about for the pharmaceutical folks, how many of those businesses that have come through your doors have thought that they've got A-player teams but actually way off the mark?
Or, well, in the first session we would do with them, we would do the talent assessment thing. We use a six box grid. So, A, B, C, above and below the line. Culture is above and below the line. I know the answer to this because we did some analysis last year where the worst company came in, they had 10% A players, and the best company to walk through the door had 35% on day one. And actually what tends to happen over time is it can be that the number of A players goes down, not because any of the staff changes, but because people's perception of A's might actually, like what it takes to be an A might go up.
Okay.
And so if you do it again the next quarter, actually you might find fewer A's. But I think we often find a series of C's, so below par performance, or we might find some people who aren't a cultural fit. Particularly, we might find some toxic A's. So they're meeting their performance criteria, but they're bullies, or they're just narcissistic, or they're just unhelpful, toxic in the business. And in my world, they've always been salespeople or network engineers. So taking out the C's, that isn't necessarily too complicated or difficult for people to get their heads around. I think then we split the B's. So what's an A? Let me just do this for an A for your audience. So to me, an A, this is the definition from Top Grading. So an A is a top 10% of available talent for a given salary, for a given job in a given location. And I'm not looking for people who want to be the CEO or be promoted. One of the team here is Jill, who does the cleaning for us. And Jill's an A player. Jill would talk to you all day long about cleaning. She has deep curiosity for new cleaning products or cleaning methodologies. She brings her own cleaning materials because what we might provide isn't good enough for her as a professional. She's my definition of an A player. You don't need to tell her what to do. She just does it.
Love it. Yeah.
She constantly surprises you having done a thing that you didn't even know needed doing. And if I think about that, what does a B player cleaner look like? A B player cleaner looks like, I'm just looking at my skirting board because that's one of the things that ends up being, they don't spot the dust on the skirting boards. You have to keep pointing it out to people. Somehow they have skirting board dust blindness. But they'll do an okay job if you are really, really specific with them. And so that's the difference between an A and a B. And I think the work from McKinsey again shows, 10x, 5x, but Google reckon their engineers are 350x. Bill Gates reckoned the engineers at Microsoft back in the day were 75x. Right, so it's not a bell curve; it's a power law.
Okay, yeah.
if you and I were doing bottles in a box on a production line, and you were world class and I was only average, then manual dexterity is like 2x as good as you could get, 2 standard deviations from the mean. With mental or cognitive ability, which is most of the work that most of our clients have their teams doing, then 5 to 10x, right, is absolutely possible. And when I get CEOs to think about a role where they've got B players and A players and describe the difference to me, it's the proactivity, resourcefulness, and they often say, I think this person is 5x or 10x or 20x better than the B player.
Okay.
But then getting rid of B players, well, the B players are split in the middle, right? So I say you can be a B plus if we think we coach you, and you could be an A.
So if that person's coachable, we can bring them up to an A, B plus.
Yes. And then you've got Bs.
And then you've got Bs.
Okay. Interestingly, one of our clients came up with a nice definition that they use, which I liked, which is an A player. So they have a performance standard for A. They don't have a performance standard for anything else, right? Because often if you have multiple performance tiers, you end up locking B in as solid or okay or acceptable.
Okay, I see what you
mean. And you never overcome that. So what they do at Time Etc. is they say this is the performance standard to be an A player. And an A player will meet that A player performance standard 3 out of the last 4 rolling quarters. Right? So if 3 times out of the last 4 quarters you've been above that performance standard, you're an A.
You're an A. Got it.
If you get above that line once in the last year, once or twice, then you're a B. And if you don't get it above ever, then you're a C. And so it's really clear, right? They only have one performance standard, and how often do you get over the line? And if you never get over the line, you're gone. If you get over the line enough, then maybe you get to stay. But ultimately, because A players can get over the line 3 or 4 times a year, and the B players are only getting over the line once or twice, it's obvious that your A players are better than your B players. And if you're the manager, why would you keep your B players around?
Yeah.
Because it's not salary, and it's not like these are purple unicorns. And so then it becomes, one of the things is it becomes less about managing and more about coaching if you've got clarity. Because it's like, how can I help you get over this performance gradient?
Yeah, you've talked about performance reviews, annual performance reviews, and how crap they are, and coming and dialing it into doing that weekly, so there are no surprises.
The thing is that when I sit with, this is one of these things where small companies mimic big companies without knowing why they're doing it, right? So they think they've all worked, they've all been in some sort of corporate job, or they've looked at the corporate world. And you sort of go, well, look, all big corporates seem to have annual appraisals, so that must be what you do. And for 10 years since I've started coaching, I've been looking for the data that underpins annual performance review, because you would think there must be some, but I haven't been able to find. I haven't been able to find any. All I can find is everybody hates them.
Yeah,
they take up a load of time. You can absolutely see the downside in terms of economic cost and lack of productivity, but I can't see any evidence anywhere that this is the thing that you would do to raise performance. It's just nonsense.
So having clear expectations in the form of scorecards, weekly coaching sessions, as opposed to.
I've got.
You got something back there, have you?
No, this is it. It's the manager from Gallup, right? Jim Harter, who's the chief science. He's the chief science officer at Gallup, and he's like, Dom, look, the killer question, the question 1 of the Gallup Q12, right, which is Gallup's measure for employee engagement to drive high performance. I know what's expected of me at work, and it's number 1 question out of their Q12 pyramid. But you don't go on to question 2. You don't care about anything else until 75% of your team give 5 out of 5. And then that is sufficient to think that the next question is the one you should then go to, which is, I have the tools to do my job. But you start with expectation and, scorecards, because, so often you say to somebody at 5 o'clock, did you win today? And they're like, I was busy.
They don't know what winning
And
means.
it's just depressing. That feels like you're down the mine digging, and you're just digging. Like, you're not even pulling coal out. Like, there's not even, I did a ton of coal. It's like, I'm just in a hole digging for no particular reason. And it's just hard. And so, that feels sort of like blue collar slavery. It just feels like miserable. Whereas if there's a reason to win, then, you get all the things you get from winning, like a sense of achievement, a sense of purpose. Maybe there's some curiosity about mastery and drive, the work from Dan Pink.
Yeah.
So I think, and then what Jim says is, so if you can set the expectation, then what you get every week is you have a 10-minute check-in. It's the employees meeting, not the managers meeting. And you say, congratulations, well done. And you praise somebody for a job well done, which means, of course, A, you have to have had expectation, and B, you've got to be able to measure it. And then you say, well done. And because one of the other questions further up is, did you receive praise for a job well done in the last 7 days? Right? That's a tough bar, right?
Yeah.
That you've got to have a one-to-one with your team every week if you're going to praise people. Or, of course, you could do it in a team setting, but that's again, it's intentional. You've got to build the systems that support that.
Yeah, and I suppose some folks would argue that there's a huge amount of time spent on that large team, but what kind of percentage of time is spent on that softer side and the people side of the business? Because it's so important. And
what do I reckon? Look, that's a 10-minute thing once a week. That's the check-in.
Check-in.
Then
for
I would
10 minutes.
do, I do daily huddles every day. That's 10 minutes. I do a team meeting every week, probably 90 minutes, right? Probably. So it's a day.
Yeah.
Right. That's a day a week. And then the rest of it is coaching. How do I make myself redundant? One of the biggest mistakes that managers make is they think their job is to get the work done. And therefore what they do is they lean in and they do the work because they used to be one of the sole contributors. So that's easy. But when we say to people, your job is to make yourself redundant, not that you're going to get fired, but if this company is growing, we need you to do a different job.
And you've got to make yourself redundant to be able to do that job. And
totally, because otherwise we're going to have to hire somebody from outside.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that, nor do we. We want to keep promoting you. But if you don't free up time to develop new skills, work on new things, work on special projects, do OKRs, you're going to get stuck here and the company's just going to grow away from you. And they're one of those, like the first half dozen people you hire, it is so sad a year, 2, 3, 4 years down the track when that person is not head of sales or head of engineering or head of HR or something. They could have been.
But they're not.
But
they haven't grown with the business.
They haven't grown and the business has outgrown them. And you're going to have to, their core skill at the beginning was that they could do 6 jobs simultaneously. And now what they need to do is they need to do one of those 6 things well enough to hold down a chair. And they just can't. But nobody coached them.
Yeah.
And so, by the time it's too late, you can't go back in time.
I mean, this is a big challenge for business owners themselves, that they need to be pulling themselves out of the execution, out of the day-to-day stuff, and stepping away and coaching the team up. And that's often where
So I have a mental model which should help people understand this.
Okay, let's have it.
So startups are so this comes from some work. Malcolm Gladwell wrote an article about strong link and weak link sports teams.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
And so basketball is a strong link sport and football is a weak link sport. But I think startups are like basketball, right? So the thing in basketball is you take 2 or 3 or 4 great players and they carry the rest of the team, right? They can make it all happen, even if the rest of the team, because the performance is absolutely linked to those few strong players. So the founders will carry the team, I think, to about 70, and then it starts to get really creaky, and they run into a wall at about 100 people because people drive complexity, not revenue. But to scale up, you have to create a football team, right? And so in soccer, the data from the European leagues over the last 30 years is the performance of the team correlates to the quality of your worst player, right? And so the whole thing's now turned upside down. This was about a small number of great players, and this one, scaling up, is about not having poor players, right? And so that comes back to the ABC, it comes back to scorecards, it comes back to hiring a team with rigor and maintaining that rigor, doing things like Amazon do this bar raiser where you're not allowed to hire somebody unless they're better than half the team you've already got, so that you are deliberately building a better team. You know, small business owners often have this, I've got Mary, she's amazing, I'm going to hire somebody cheaper and shitter.
Yeah.
And so they are making it, they are unconsciously making a decision to reduce the quality of their team. When I point that out to people, they go, "Oh,
That's it.
you are, I am doing that. You are right. I am guilty, but I hadn't." Because the thing is, when it's basketball, you can have a rock star and then surround them with some people who aren't as good. But that only gets you to about 70 employees, and then the model breaks. Because the people that you've hired aren't as good as the founders, and then the people that they've hired aren't as good. They're not able to carry it. So then football, the managers, the CEO's got to get off the field, right? They've got to, at 100 people, you've got to make sure that the thing that got you there, which was I was great at marketing, or I was great at sales, or I was a great engineer, you've got to hire somebody better than you into that seat, so that the only thing you're doing is you're a full-time CEO. And so that is a massive, I mean, I talk to lots of the clients, you know, because we help clients on that sort of 50 to 500 10x journey. And I talk to CEOs at about 70 employees, and they are like, I say, they say, well, I'm interested in some business coaching. And I say, are you enjoying it? They say, no, I fucking hate it. I'm spending my entire life doing admin shit or people shit. I'm not doing any of the stuff that I used to enjoy when we were 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 people. And they just haven't changed the model. And it's like, look, I can help you. You know, it's the work you do too. Look, you know, it's like, I can help you. You need to change the model. You need a team, right? So the biggest thing in the executive team is, in a team that is a high performing team, the accountability is held at the team level, not the CEO. So the CEO in a startup, the CEO is managing through a series of one-to-ones. And so in fact, I wrote a blog post saying the CEO should cancel all their one-to-ones, because otherwise they don't change. You don't change the dynamic. The dynamic has to be the
you're
team.
Stuck in that mode. You have to change the dynamic. Yeah.
So, you know, a high performing team will set quality objectives, and the team members will hold each other to account. So, you know, that's massively different.
And you're always looking, I loved what you said about hiring up rather than kind of bringing the team down, looking for. So I think, conscious of time, just one or two more things I wanted to run by you is salespeople. Big challenge at the moment.
I've got 3 minutes.
Let's okay. I'll tell you what. What's your biggest piece of advice for business owners going into 2025?
Ask yourself these 2 questions. Would I enthusiastically rehire my team one by one, run it through your head? And if the answer is no, do something about it.
Makes sense. One more. What does freedom mean to you, Dom?
I did it. So the other thing that's worth doing is doing a 1-page personal plan from the sort of scaling up playbook. And when I did that a few years ago, I decided that my measure of success was taking the girls to school every day.
Nice.
And so, you know, the intentionality that we've built in the coaching business here is we do it here. I get to take the girls to school every day, and then I coach from the farm during the day. And so that's fantastic for me.
Love it. Okay. Awesome. Thanks very much, Dom. Really appreciate it.